Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hi. Howdy doody.
It's howdy boys and girls.
It's howdy doody time for me and you time. I don't know the words, so thus ends my singing career.
It was technically pre my era, but it was on, there was a lot of stuff on Nickelodeon and stuff.
Can we just acknowledge that howdy doody was before my era as well?
It was, yeah.
It was a long time ago.
What was
Look at us being culturally literate.
Pretty sure Mr. Ed was also before my time. Watch that too. Anything that was black and white was likely before my time.
Yes.
And I watched a lot of black and white stuff. Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of is it Hee Haw? That was the variety show that was very Southern based. I watched that too.
I watched Hee Haw. I had relatives who came and visited several times from England. Mm-hmm. Fucking loved, my uncle especially loved Hee Haw.
That's funny.
He just thought it was the greatest thing. He couldn't understand a word they said, which is hilarious because he had a very heavy Cockney accent and no teeth.
He's like, what are I saying?
You could understand it. It took a couple minutes. Once you got the rhythm, it's like any other accent. Yeah. Once you got the rhythm of what he was talking about, it was fine. But it was like, it took that couple of minutes to just tilt your head to one side and go, sorry, what?
That one I definitely have only very vague memories of. I feel like Minnie Pearl was somebody who was on it, and there was something with like a hat with a number. I don't know.
The hat had its price tag, because I have bought things and had somebody say, cut the tag off, Minnie Pearl. And young people are just look at you completely blankly like, who?
Huh?
What you talking about, you?
What?
No. So.
Yeah, that's funny. So because we talked about the skit shows basically last time. And I'm not sure this was so much a skit show as a variety show. If I remember right, there was singing and stuff like that.
I don't know how you would differentiate.
It's super vague. I just figured like the skit shows are all about here's one comedy show after another one. Sure, Carol Burnett would like bust out a song every little once in a while, but that was when she was doing her walking on the stage thing.
So
or as
what
part
about
of a skit.
What was the Sonny and Cher show? That was a variety show.
That was a variety show.
And what about the Jackie Gleason show?
I did not watch that. That one was outside my
I remember watching it in black and white, like on PBS or something.
Okay.
Not the Honeymooners. He had I think it was a variety show with the June Taylor Dancers, because when the June Taylor Dancers did their number, they always had a camera suspended over them because there's always a part they did on the floor and it had that kaleidoscopy effect. Why I remember that? Why do I remember that? And I can't remember to take off my glasses before I get in the shower.
Weird. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't remember, but I wear contacts, so they just go in there with me.
Yep.
Because I can't wear glasses. So, not a problem for me. My dad would take a shower in the dark because he was like, I'm so blind anyway, and I have to take my glasses off to get in here, so why would I have the light on? I can't see anything more. I feel like you can see something. You're not blind.
That's the difference between a man and a woman taking a shower.
Right, he was like, whatever.
You gotta...
A dude wouldn't have to shave in the shower.
Exactly.
I'm like, I gotta be able to see all the way to the end of these fucking long legs. I'll still miss a piece.
I am so sorry you have such long legs.
You should be.
It must be a burden to you. It is a burden.
Especially when you're young and you're like a fucking foal.
Yeah.
And you're like,
and you're all knobby knees. And,
yes.
Yeah. I do love.
Talk to me when we're on an airplane, bitch.
I will.
When I'm like sitting like this with my legs spread apart
I'll be like,
because they touch the seat.
I'll be like, you're man-spreading into my space.
And I'm like, you're welcome. Take it and like it.
Yes, ma'am.
Move those little legs out of my way. That's like, I had a friend who was no longer a friend like a long time ago, and she could turn anything into an argument about how awful life was with the thing we were doing because she was short.
Okay.
I was like, wow, life must be super hard for you. Like, it's like, You know what? Because I was cutting a watermelon, and I'm skilled at cutting right through that shit. And she was like, well, that's because you're tall. And I was all, what?
Does she not have a table in her home? Does she not have a... I don't get that.
Get a stool, sister.
Or cut it up on your table instead of your counter. Our counters are high. For kitchen counters, they're a little bit high. I like it, but they are set a little bit high.
I don't know. I suppose ours are normal. My dad, when he was... They adjusted our kitchen, my parents' kitchen a little bit to lower cap, but his bathroom was big time. Lowered everything for the wheelchair.
Yeah.
Which was nice. But now the whole house is like wheelchair geared. Mm-hmm. I was like, you're going to have to sell a very specific print, but it has a lift. And who doesn't want... Oh, it's not an elevator. It's a lift. It does have a door. But that's what they like stress that all the time. It's not an elevator. It's a lift.
I noted.
There's a difference.
Okay.
It will go up to the second floor, down to the first floor, down slightly more with a door on the opposite and into the garage. Because you could still drive because they have hand controls like a tractor.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's what my neighbor across the street got, if she got a lift. Because her front door, she's in a wheelchair now, and her front door has steep steps down to the sidewalk. Otherwise, she has to go down the stairs to her garage. So I hope she has something like that to help her get out of the house.
We built a ramp in our garage for my dad to be able to
and I have not been in her garage, so I do not know.
Yeah.
Somebody pulled up one day. One of her little rideshare people pulled up and just sat in the driveway blowing the horn. Then they got out of the car, stood by the running car, and yelled her name. And I was like...
She can't hear you. She didn't hear the fucking horn.
And I'm sitting there going, do I walk over there and say, do you have a fucking phone? Because you do know she's in a wheelchair. Perhaps you would like to knock or call her instead of standing there. And she's like yelling her name like, ah. Just not. I was like, I can hear it because I have my window open and I'm like, you're pissing me off, lady.
What is it? The acapella movie? That had Rebel Wilson, Pitch Perfect. There was the one character who was like, who would always...
You couldn't hear.
Mm-hmm. They're like, what? I would be so annoyed if I were around her. I cannot handle that. And I will only say what once. And then I'm like, it wasn't important. Let's move on. Can't do it. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Sometimes it's like I hear it and my brain scrambles it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm sorry. Are you talking about turtle soup? And they're like,
no,
I was talking about the interest rates in South Africa.
Like, so it's turtle soup then. That's what I think of the interest rates in South Africa. I see turtle soup.
And sometimes Joe will say something and then he'll look at me and he could just see the wheels turning and he goes, you have no idea what I just said. And I'm like, no, I absolutely do not. Do you want to repeat it or just let it go?
Yeah, when Jeffrey went out because he was getting a new bumper and like a trunk door for a car. And it's called You Pull, You Haul, or the Pull and Haul, or you pay and pull. Pay and pull. So he was like, I went to the Pull and Haul or whatever, and I was like, if I'm pulling, I'm not paying. And he's like, what? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
It's like when if you're reading and somebody comes in and starts talking to you.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, halfway through, you hear half of a sentence and you look up and you're like, what?
That's right. So I'm really good at, I can shut down completely and like dissociate and not listen. I don't like gossip. I don't like hearing private things about people they would not want me to hear. And so I shut down when something like that's happening. And I'm like, I'm not going to hear it. I don't want to hear it. And so when I was at the Mile High Con, I happened across two friends who were sitting talking. And I first got there and I saw them. And so I just diverted over. I was on my way to the bar because I had won a little flash fiction competition thingy. Kind of.
That's right.
Yeah, that was fun. So I was like, I'm going to reward myself with a glass of wine.
Very nice.
So I walk by, see what, divert over. And I'm like, hi. And they're like, hi. And then she's reading his tarot. And I was like, okay, I'm going to walk away. And then I went to the bar and I sat there and I had my wine and I talked to the bartender, who was a very nice lady. And some random person came up and said, where did you get that sweater? Yes, that whole thing happened then. And then the bartender was like, I'm so glad you asked because I was also wondering where she got that. And it was just a sweater. So I was like, let me pull it up on Amazon. And I did. And they took screenshots. And then we were done. And then I finished my wine. I basically just played games on my phone. It was very nice. Nobody bugged me. Nobody came up and talked to me. That was nice. Anyway, I'm walking back and I'm like, surely they are done now with their reading. And then I walked over and I stood there, I said hi, and I thought that they were maybe finishing up a conversation. And I was like, okay. And then I waited and then I pulled out a chair and sat down. And then I realized, nope, this was a very serious conversation. It sounded personal to me. And I just went, shit, awkward, shut down. Because now I can't interrupt them to be like, do you want me to go? So I'm running through the possibilities in my head. Then I went, zoop. I was just on the phone. So, yeah, I don't know. So I blocked it out. And then I finally heard, okay, Shannon. And that's how you get me, right? Because the number of times I've had to tell my kids who sat there and talked to me while I was hyper focusing on something. Mm-hmm. And then I realized it eventually leaks through and I'm all, are you talking to me? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, you have to say mom first. Because then I can I can focus on. So anyway, okay, Shannon, right? And I'm like, okay. And then we just started talking, right? And later, the guy was like, it's funny because I threw some funny things your way while you're doing it. And you were well and truly shut down. And I said something about it. And Deanna said, oh yeah, she's blocking us out. And I did not hear any of that.
Wow.
Wow. That's how thorough it was. I will not listen to somebody's personal life.
I don't know.
So there you go. That's how thoroughly I do that.
I do not want to know their business unless they choose. If
they wanted me to be part of the conversation, they would draw me into the conversation.
Exactly.
So yes.
Exactly.
And I'm like, this is your business.
Look at us being grown ass adults. Don't tell anybody.
When
we have a moment. We have moments of
moments of adultness.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was so you didn't get many trick-or-treaters?
I got 7.
I had less than we get a ton of trick-or-treaters in this neighborhood, but I did not have as many. And I think they all went to college because the only teens that stopped by were some that my daughter knew. So her age, so juniors and thereabouts, because I know that her group is mixed with the grades.
Right.
And yeah, that was it. And then I really didn't get any teens because I was already giving big handfuls and stuff. We got extra because I always give extra to the teenagers. And then, yeah, I did not really see teenagers. It was crazy to me.
We got the best thing, though. Before the little trick-or-treaters started, the doorbell rings. And Joan hops up and we go open the door because we're like, oh, yay, someone. It's my neighbor from across the street. So we have neighbors who have 2 girls who are the same ages as thing 1 and thing 2. And this was the older daughter who was with her new husband and her new baby. She wanted us to meet the baby. Oh my God, that child is so cute. So I was like, come in. I have to take your picture. I was like, oh my God, wait, I got to get my phone. I got to get a picture. I got to send it to Lizzie and Nikki. Oh my God. So
I did get to meet 2 new neighbors because several houses in the neighborhood sold recently, and they were super sweet and they're super young couples. And they're one had a 8-month-old and it's their first child. Wow. And one had, she was, I don't remember, 3-ish, 4-ish.
Okay.
I have no idea. So as I told one of them, because I looked at the baby and I said, well, first Halloween, right? Because there was I'm like, my brain can no longer, I have teenagers. I don't know how to estimate baby age anymore. Nope. I'm like, is it walking?
That's what I used to do. I could look at a baby and see what they were doing. Were they holding their head up? Were they trying to stand up? Were they doing this? And I could go, oh, your baby's about this old. Oh, yes. Very good eye. And now I'm like, well, how old is your little blob of humanity?
Right. So that was cute. I guess I'm going to start.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay.
Is it good? No.
It's intense.
Oh.
It's intense. And I'm going to do a shout out this time to Carol, who's one of our listeners. And she sent a private message saying, hey, have you heard of this? And I was like, I haven't. It's on my list. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to freaking do it. Why don't I just do it, Carol? So
sometimes when you get it, you have to act on it right then.
Right?
Or it gets on the list.
So that's why I told her, I was like, man, I have a list, but it is pages long at this point. And then I usually end up finding something new and shiny instead of something from my list.
And not only do you have the list, but then you have the Pinterest board. And
I have pictures on my phone.
And then you have stuff saved on your phone and stuff saved in Facebook.
And I have a folder on my desktop where I try and migrate the screenshots and the stuff that I've saved with ideas and put them in there so that, and there are times where I'm like, okay, let me go look in the folder, and I start going through them until something catches.
Oh,
because you have to be in the mood.
And sometimes I go through the folder, I'm like, why the hell did I put this in here? Or I'll be like, oh, we did that. I did that, right? One of us did that. And then I have to go check our little master list and go, okay, click.
So this is one.
Oh, yes.
This is the big one. So this is the Moor murders. On October 7th, 1965, a young man named David Smith told police of a horrifying murder he'd witnessed the night before. He'd been called over to his sister-in-law, Myra Hindley, and brother-in-law, Ian Brady's house. Myra was his wife, Maureen's older sister. He heard screaming, according to his testimony, and ran into the living room. Now, there were different versions of this story, and also Ian told a different version, and Myra told a different... Yeah.
Okay.
But he ran into the living room where Ian was straddling a young man and holding a hatchet. The man was half on his head and shoulders were on the couch, his legs were on the ground. Ian slammed the hatchet into the boy's head while David watched, ultimately hitting him 14 times with it. As David, Ian grabbed an electrical cord then and strangled the boy to make him stop screaming.
So he's still screaming after he was hit in the head with a hatchet 14 times.
I'm unclear. It might not have been his head. I think Ian was just chopping away. The first hit was to his head. Okay. So, and he unclear on the order of operations.
Okay. Jesus.
In fact, the first thing I read didn't say anything about 14 times, so I thought it was like one, and then he was screaming, and they were like, shut up, because the houses were close together, because it was a poorer area. But a lot of articles said 14, so I was like, all right, I don't know.
So why were they trying to kill this child?
We're not going there right now.
Okay.
Because Ian had sprained his ankle in the attack, he wanted David to carry the body out to his car, but David could not carry this. The boy was 17, by the way. He wasn't like 5. So, and to be clear, David Smith was also 17 at the time.
I'm trying to imagine calling my brother-in-law and saying, I need you to come over and help me.
There's a backstory to this.
And then telling them, I need you to move this dead body that you just watched me dead.
So, since they couldn't, David helped clean up the body. They wrapped it in plastic and they moved it into the spare bedroom. And then they locked, at that time, it had to be locked with a key from the outside for this door. Okay. David was instructed to come back the next day to help dispose of the body in the Moors. Now, one of the things, I did read a couple of them said that he had a pram that they thought, okay, well, he said, bring back the pram because he had children.
You can't fit a 17-year-old.
And put the body, we'll use that and we'll take it out to the car. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not, if that was the plan. Instead, he went home and told his wife what had happened. Together, they waited until just after 6 a.m. in the morning. He got home about 3 a.m. after all this. Before he armed himself. And we're not talking a gun. He had a screwdriver and a knife to go walk out because he didn't have a phone. He had to go to this communal phone. And he called the police. They came and picked him up with a car. And that's when he told them what had happened. So David himself, who again was only 17, was no stranger to legal issues. Just to be clear, we're not talking clean cut. He'd been in legal trouble from the age of 11 with multiple convictions for housebreaking. I enjoy calling it that. That's the British for B&E. And assault occasioning bodily harm is the other charge. In fact, his wife's family had frowned on their marriage, which involved a 7 months pregnant Maureen. They were underage at the time and had refused to attend their wedding, leaving Maureen and David to be influenced by Myra and Ian. David looked up to Ian, but the crime he'd witnessed was too much for him. He had never murdered anyone, though he had been a suspect in an ex-girlfriend's disappearance a few years earlier, which is going to come up again. And though he talked about committing bank robberies with Ian during their friendship and even probably banding about some talk of murder, it's clear that maybe the murder was a step too far. Until later, anyway. 2 officers showed up at the residence in question. One dressed up as a bread delivery man and knocked on the back door first as their approach. And he asked for the man of the house. And she said, there's no man. I'm not married. There's no man in here. There's no men in here. And then he revealed he was a police officer and said, okay, let us in. And so she did. And of course, Ian was there. He had a sprained ankle. He was laid up. He was actually writing a letter to his employer that I assume Myra was then going to have to deliver as to why he could not come into work.
Oh my God.
So they let the cops look around. And the cops said they were investigating a shooting. They didn't say they were there about this
because your brother-in-law says you whacked something.
Right. So they said, we're investigating a shooting. Can we look around? They discovered, of course, that one of the doors was locked. And they said, hey, we need to get in this door too. And Myra said, oh, the key's at work. And the cop said, cool, let's go to your work and get the key. And then she was like, that. And at that point, Ian said, just open the door for him. Yeah. And so they did. And there was Edward. So that there was a body in there. There it was. And they identified that 17-year-old as Edward Evans. He was an engineer's apprentice. And it turned out, it was interesting, there were several, again, if it's not an American killing, the information is sparse. We Americans are a sick bunch.
Yep.
So it said he had either picked him up at Manchester Center railway station, and he was big on going to, like, he had a thing for railway stations, which will come up, or a gay bar, depending upon which article I read.
Okay.
Both Myra and Ian claimed there'd been a fight between Edward and Ian and that the death was accidental. Which, like, sure, that might hold water until you look at the body.
Yeah.
While Ian was arrested right away, Myra wasn't a suspect at first. It wasn't until the 11th, a couple days later, when the police not only realized she was involved, but that there were likely more victims than just Edward, and she was arrested too and charged as an accessory. With the couple jailed, police searched the house more thoroughly. One of the things they found was a school exercise book with the name of another missing teenage boy, John Kilbride, inside of it. 12-year-old John, as it turned out, had been their second victim. So I'm not going to go through these in order.
Okay.
He disappeared on November 23rd, 1963, from a market where he was working to pack up stalls. Myra had convinced him to get into the car by saying it was late and he'd get in trouble if he wasn't home, so she'd go ahead and give him a ride. Instead, he was taken to the Moor, and the excuse, and you'll see they use this over and over again, oh, I lost this really expensive glove. Can you go out with my boyfriend here, who arrives in a different vehicle, and look for this glove? And of course, and kids want to please, you know? And so that's going to come up over and over, and it's sad, because it's like, okay. So out he went. Just Ian and him to look for the expensive glove, the phantom glove. And so Myra stayed in the car. There's going to be variations on this, and there are going to be changes in what Ian says happened and what she says happened as we go. But anyway, for this one, apparently, Ian and John went out to search for the glove. Ian came back to the car a while later. He told her that he had raped and murdered John. He first slit his throat with a serrated blade. It was a 6-inch blade. It didn't do the job. Oh. So then he used a shoelace and strangled him to finish him off. Then Myra followed Ian out to the side of the grave with her dog Puppet and was photographed kneeling next to the fresh grave. And I will be posting that picture. I mean, you can't see a body. It's her on the moor next to some freshly disturbed earth. Wow. And it's really hard to see.
That's a Kodak moment.
Luggage was located in the abandoned luggage department at a local train station. They were given a kind of a tip that David said, they had me like pack up some books and some stuff and take it somewhere. I don't know what all was in the suitcases. They just told me to take these suitcases and then, or to get these suitcases ready, and then they would finish it and then they'd take it somewhere, he said. But Ian has a thing about railway stations. And then, so they found the luggage they have like a abandoned, you know, here's some random orphaned luggage. They always have those at the station. Inside were some suspicious things, including a tape and disturbing photographs of a nude young girl in sexual poses. They listened to the tape where a girl was pleading for her life and asking to go home to her mom. She said her name was Leslie Ann Weston. She cried and screamed while being tormented by both Myra and Ian. Both of their voices are clearly heard, and you're going to see why I'm emphasizing this later. Okay. 10-year-old Leslie had disappeared December 26th, 1964 from a fair. They called it a fun fair. It looked like kind of a carnival. To get her to go with them, Myra had dropped packages she was carrying, and when the girl helped pick them up, Myra asked her to carry some of them to the car, and then convinced her, come home and help me get these out. Yeah. And again, 10-year-old, eager to please, she went along. Her death feels like, they're all awful deaths, to be clear, but her death feels the worst to me. And the circumstances of her identification are pretty heartbreaking and horrific, like her poor mom. Oh. Without going too much into the details, she was forced to get naked, gagged, put in sexual poses, raped, and murdered by strangulation with a 16-minute tape recording of her final minutes. Ugh. To be clear, when they found all this, they had not found her body, right? So her mother was shown 2 of what they considered the safer photos, and asked to listen to a short portion of the tape.
That would just break your heart.
Yes. So, and I will say the entire tape was later played in court. They did not say if the mom was there, but these parents were very actively involved in the cases, a lot of them. And so I suspect she probably was, because she stayed very active throughout.
I don't know that I could listen to that.
God. So that's what bothers me. You know, it's like, first of all, the child being put through this, and then the mother having to listen to it. Ugh. When her body was found, later, her mother was asked to identify the clothing that had been buried at her feet, though her body was still recognizable at that point, hadn't fully broken down. The way they found her body was by talking to a 12-year-old girl named Patricia Hodges, who was a neighbor of the couple. They'd taken her to the Moors a lot to gather peat for the neighborhood gardens. They had not harmed her, even though she was their perfect victim, because she was a neighbor, and it was figured that it would be easier to track her.
Everybody knew her and had seen her with them.
Right. So they knew not to do anything. So they were conniving. Yes. They were not stupid. So she took him out, and she was like, here are some places we went to gather peat. These are the places we went to over and over and over again. And what did they find? They find an arm sticking up out of this very shallow grave. And they thought it was one of the other victims I'm going to go into, but it was actually her. So there had been other photographs in the recovered luggage. Like, they had just legitimately packed up anything they thought was suspicious because they lived in this close together neighborhood and he'd screamed. So they were just landscape photos for the most part, and then photos of each other on the moor. There were a lot of photos with Myra and her dog Puppet. Police went public with the landscape photos to get help from those in the area to try and identify the actual areas of the moors in them so that they could search them. And this led them to John's body on October 21st. But they also used photos of the dog, which started with it as a puppy. So they were able to trace these photos from puppy to current. But to find out its current age, sadly, they took him to a vet. And while under anesthesia for the process, Puppet ended up dying.
Oh, God.
Myra was devastated. She was certain the police had killed the dog on purpose, but it wasn't in their care. It was in veterinary care when it happened. And they noticed this was the first she'd shown emotion while in custody or involving any of this. Now with evidence of 3 murders, charges were pressed against Ian for the murders of Leslie, John, and Edward, and Myra for Leslie and Edward. She claimed to have been in the car when John was killed, and Ian agreed with this, though they would disagree on her part in other murders in the future. Myra actually claimed to have not been in the room when Leslie was killed, instead off running a bath, and said she hadn't been part of the sexual assault either, though her voice on the tape seems to disprove her not being involved at all. One of the things that was quoted from the tape was Leslie saying something about not taking her clothes off. Myra was in the room when that happened. Okay, at least. Funnily enough, as all of this proceeded through court, she would always be some other place during the actual rapes and murders. She basically only took responsibility for luring the kids in, for baiting the kids. And while Ian, in the beginning, said that she had only done what he said ever and that she wasn't involved, his story would also change several times. Before we go on to other murders and their trials, let's learn a little about Myra and Ian. I had to share where Ian was born in 1938 because it was in Gorbals. Oh. Do you remember Gorbals? I did a thing on the vampire of Gorbals necropolis. He was from there. Okay. It's in Glasgow.
Okay. I do remember that.
Yes! I was like, look! No wonder he was fucked up. They all told their children in that era that the vampire was going to get them and kill them, and they grew up with the smoke and all the crap from the factories.
But the rest of the kids didn't turn out to be.
I know. No, I'm not saying that's the reason, but I was like, holy shit! Was he there? No, I don't remember what year that was. Probably not. I think it was way earlier than that. Anyway, his name at that time was Ian Duncan Stewart. But his mom was single when he was born, and he would later take on his stepfather's last name of Brady much later. And he'd live with them briefly in Manchester, which is where he'd remain, and eventually commit his crimes. So these two are in Manchester doing all this, because I did not put that in the beginning, like I normally do. I know how to establish setting early on. I did not do it.
You chose not to.
He was incredibly smart, as these sorts often are, and though he was given to a family to be raised when very small, they already had 4 kids of their own, because his mom wasn't able to make ends meet. He did well enough in school to be accepted into Shawlands Academy, which was a school for super smart kids. At the same time, he got into legal trouble multiple times while going to that academy for housebreaking, theft, threatening a girlfriend with a knife because she went to a dance with another boy, that sort of thing. That girl was smart enough to see, and after he threatened her with a knife, she was done. It's claimed that he bragged about torturing animals as a kid, but he stated that's a lie and that he didn't torture animals. But people were like, he actively told us stories of doing this. Now, he didn't hurt Puppet, but Myra seems to be the only person he wasn't interested in hurting in some way. He became hooked on reading about Nazi acts of cruelty, read Mein Kampf, read Nietzsche, read Dostoevsky. He was reading all of this stuff, but he was really big on Nazi stuff. Myra was born in Manchester in 1942 and never left. Her father was a World War II veteran, an alcoholic, and an abuser. One thing he taught her to do well was to fight and defend herself, and he reinforced this by threatening physical punishment if she didn't fight back against people. Like a story that was told was this boy cut her face, and she went home upset about it, and her dad said, I will beat you with the leather if you don't go out there now and do something about what he did to you. And she went out, and she punched him, and she punched him a couple times, knocked his ass down because daddy had trained her.
Damn.
A forensic psychologist would later say that her, quote, relationship with her father brutalized her. She was not only used to violence in the home, but rewarded for it outside. When this happens at a young age, it can distort a person's reaction to such situations for life. While Ian showed problematic behavior from early on and would later be deemed a psychopath and various other things, Myra was well-liked and known to be empathetic. When she was 15, a friend invited her out for a swim, but she was going somewhere else instead, and she turned him down, so he went alone. He drowned that day, and she blamed herself forever for not being there because she was a strong swimmer and felt she could have rescued him. So what I'm trying to say is this is not a person without a conscience, but I haven't seen any indication of Ian having one. The two met in 1961 when they worked at the same place. She was a typist and he was a stock clerk. It was almost a year of working together before he asked her out for the first time, and they quickly became inseparable. It's so Bonnie and Clyde. They loved to go to movies and read together, though those movies were often X-rated, and the books were his favorite Nazi and Aryan pieces, plus, again, Nietzsche, and they liked to read the Marquis de Sade to each other.
Of course.
Experts on couple killers like these two often say there is always a dominant partner and a subservient partner. They are never equals, or they wouldn't be able to work together. They would fight. They would have conflicts. Letters Myra wrote to friends during their early relationship revealed some concerning things, such as him drugging her, but also her confession that she was absolutely obsessed with him and could never leave him. She changed everything about herself for him, including her way of dressing and her loss of a belief in God, though she'd been a dedicated Catholic before. She dressed more sexually. She dyed her hair blonde to, Aryan. And they photographed each other in illicit poses. Of more concern, they withdrew from those around them, and she seemed to have no other friends. So this is very much that controlling abuser, right?
Mm-hmm. Separate them from their friends.
Yep. The question becomes, when did they stop being horn dogs who read problematic literature and start raping and murdering children? Right? Like, that's still a transition.
That's still a big step.
It was Ian who convinced Myra he wanted to commit a perfect murder.
Ugh, of course.
And his inspiration was Leopold and Loeb. True crime listeners will know that those were a pair of killers. On July 12th, 1963, they rented a van which Myra drove, and Ian followed behind on his Triumph Tiger Cub motorcycle. He told her when he saw the perfect victim, he'd flash his lights, and then she should stop and coerce them into the vehicle, was the plan. He flashed his lights when he saw an 8-year-old girl walking along, but Myra kept driving. Now, why do we know she's 8? Because she would later say this was because she knew the girl who was a neighbor of her mom's. It was about 7:30 p.m. when he flashed his lights again. This time, Myra stopped. The girl was 16-year-old Pauline Reed. Pauline was friends with Myra's little sister, Maureen. She was heading off to a disco when they found her, using the old I lost a glove in the Moor trick for the first time, because she was their first victim. Myra got Pauline into the van and drove her out to the Moors. Ian pulled up on his bike, and off they went into Saddleworth Moor, looking for that glove. It's funny because people often attribute to Ted Bundy pulling off the help me shtick. This is before.
It's been going on.
She was raped. Her throat deeply cut. Spine actually partially severed.
Oh,
so again,
God.
we've got that. Her coat and necklace were, because of the violence of it all, a portion of her coat and her necklace were actually inside the slit throat, like you said on last episode. And she was left to bleed out while Ian walked away to get a spade with which to bury her. Myra sat with her until she was gone. This death is one where they disagreed on how much Myra had participated. Ian claimed she was part of the rape, but Myra claimed she was in the car until he came to get her, having already slit Pauline's throat. Pauline's body would not be found until 1987.
Oh my God.
David Smith was her ex-boyfriend. So that's the one I said brought.
Okay.
And he was looked at for a disappearance because he was on the cops' radar, but they found he was nowhere near it. He had nothing to do with it. And it was actually, that sounds like it was done pretty quick for him. He was never a major suspect. But he was an ex-boyfriend with a criminal history. There was one other confirmed victim of the couple, though Ian has claimed to have killed more people, mostly adults, and local journalists have often tried to blame other disappearances on them. There's one article that went into some of the ones that were accused and no, her father killed this one. She was found and the father had killed her. This one is alive, so you guys should really stop putting up articles about this. Keith Bennett was taken June 16th, 1964, while walking to his grandmother's house. He was 12. Myra asked him to help put some boxes into her vehicle in the back, and then she'd drive him to his destination. But Ian was in the back. So once more, they took him to the Moor and asked him to find a lost glove. On this one, they agreed that Myra wasn't part of it. She waited in the vehicle while Ian took Keith off to find the glove. Ian raped him, strangled him with string, and buried him on the Moor. His body has never been found, though not for lack of trying. His mother wrote Myra in jail twice, begging for help, and Myra did actually try, but could not.
Too much time had passed.
She could not help them locate the grave.
Oh.
Both Ian and Myra pled not guilty. Ian was pedantic and arrogant in court, were the descriptions of him, and had everyone basically turned against him. He thought he was the shit. He gave all kinds of excuses. He lied constantly. He accused David Smith of committing some of the crimes. Myra mostly counted herself absent during the crimes, but admitted Ian had killed them. And again, she said she was responsible for getting them, but she also then claimed he'd beaten her and threatened to kill her family if she didn't help. I don't know if that's true. I don't think so. I think she later kind of come out and went, yeah, I was more responsible than I made out. The death penalty had been abolished that very year, so they both got life, which Margaret, that's why I knew what year.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow. I thought you were just pulling that out.
I know you did.
I thought you were so smart.
Which Margaret Thatcher would later make a whole life tariff, meaning no release at any point. They could set a tariff and be like, okay, 30, your tariff is 30. That means you can be considered for release during this life sentence at this point. She did that in 1990. At that time, the experts saw him as being the one steering and her as complacent partner controlled by him. They did feel, of course, that she was still a liar and that she was a party to the crimes. Over the years, they admitted to the murders, including those of Keith and Pauline, those last two. And both tried to help find those two bodies, though it didn't seem like Ian's intent, but he was like, I'll help, because Myra's already being taken out to the Moors. I think he just wanted to be taken out to the Moors.
Probably.
And then he got there and he was like, it's all different. She spent hours trying to help them and then was accused of doing it for the press. And then the mom wrote to her again and she was like, let me try one more time. Yeah. So Myra on one of them was like, you know what, though? I remember that I could see the specific landmark on the horizon when we were doing it. And it was because of that tip that they found Pauline's body then in 1987. The other 5 murders Ian claimed to have committed had no basis. In fact, investigators did try to look and say, okay, he said that he got into this bar fight and did this thing, right? Did any of this happen? Did we find a victim that meets this? Was there a missing person? Not a thing. So it's thought that was completely all made up and he was just trying. He loved to write to the press. He wouldn't talk to the psychiatrists at the hospital, but he would sure write to the press.
Okay.
And so he did like the attention.
Mm-hmm.
They have many times conducted further searches, including one with advanced technology between 2003 and 2009. They kept trying different areas, but ultimately gave up. In September 2022, a man claimed to have found a skull, but police found nothing where he pointed them. And then I was like, okay, but what about the skull? I don't think he ever produced one.
Huh.
Ian enjoyed attention from the press, like I said, while in a high-security mental hospital. He was found to have all these mental issues, so they put him in that sort of thing. He even published a book analyzing serial killers in 2001 through a U.S. publishing house. I'm not naming the book, nor am I naming the publishing house. He maintained he never wanted to leave imprisonment, but often begged to be allowed to kill himself by starvation. He tried to starve himself, but they can just stick a tube down your throat and be like, sure, then we're going to confine you here. And we are going to force feed you. They're allowed to do that. I'm not sure that's allowed here. Because we have restraint laws.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't look into it that deeply. Right? So he transcribed. At one point, he never said he felt guilty for killing anybody. But then he was like, well, I'm paying penance. And so he would ask for things. He tried to donate a kidney to see. He was like, does anybody want a kidney? I'll give my kidney. And then he spent a long time transcribing classical texts into Braille, which is funny because you mentioned somebody doing that at one point.
Yes. I can't remember.
And it was fairly recent.
It was a woman.
Yes. Now ultimately he couldn't keep doing that because they thought he might try to use the Braille machine against himself or somebody else. And so they finally took it away. So then he couldn't do that anymore. And the one thing he expressed remorse for was that Myra got imprisoned. Yeah. So it's like, okay. But he died May 15th, 2017 of restrictive pulmonary disease. And I looked at that and it involves like really restrictive breathing and it sounds really miserable. And I was like, good. Right. Not good for anybody else who has it, by the way, but good for the serial killer and rapist. Like, he should be tortured a bit. A lot. Myra and Ian corresponded by mail until Myra broke up with him in 1971 after they were in jail because she'd fallen in love with Warden Patricia Cairns. Cairns attempted to help her escape at one point by duplicating keys, by making impressions, but the impressions were, and I could not find how this happened, but they were intercepted by an off-duty police officer. So somehow all of that got caught. Okay. Cairns went to prison herself for this attempted jailbreak. She got a 6-year sentence. I didn't see how long she served. She appealed often, even she as in Myra, appealed often, even had some people thinking she should be released. She had like a support group outside. But Leslie's mother, the one who had listened to the tape and identified photos of her baby girl, fought very publicly to keep Myra in prison. And every time that hit the news and somebody was saying, we need to free her because she was just a victim too, then there was Leslie's mom saying, hell no. I heard that tape.
Yeah.
She was part of it. While I imagine he was the one in charge and there was some coercion, she still went along with this stuff, still needs to be punished because if you can be that influenced, what did I say last time? If you can be that influenced, you can always be that influenced. Right. She came very close to being released November 25th, 2002. And actually, again, her supporters were preparing her a false identity and everything. They were going to take her and help her get this new life. But she died November 15th. 10 days before the ruling came back that they could be.
I'm so sorry.
Of bronchial pneumonia, which again sounds pretty unpleasant to me. She'd already had several health issues leading up to this, including angina and a brain aneurysm. Of those who paid her tribute, none were related to her. Patricia Cairns handled the scattering of her ashes. And in fact, a lot of the people refused to cremate her. I think they had to go outside the city to find somebody to cremate her because I bring it up later, but she was by far the most reviled of the two because people were like, well, he was a dude, but they were like, but a woman should know better. You know, it was the 60s.
You're supposed to nurture, she was not murder.
Hated the most in the press, in public. Yes. She was a monster, and they were like, well, shrug, he's a dude. I was reading through this. There was even a whole psychological
boys will be
analysis of it, of why this was so bad and why she was so reviled. It's fascinating. There's all sorts of historical stuff that came up in this that I left out that was fascinating because it was like this post-war. They had slums and they would keep moving people because they wanted to revivify, right? So like David and Maureen got moved multiple times because they were living in the slums and they'd be like, no, we're going to clean this. So we're moving you to this area. Like there was all this fascinating stuff just about the region and the era and the time frame. If anybody ever wanted to look that up because you're into it. During the trials, various newspapers and magazines offered David Smith a significant amount of money for the sole rights to his story. Folks in Manchester were not okay with him profiting from these murders, and he and Maureen were reviled. But guess who it all got taken out on? Also Maureen, because, women. Maureen's mother had sided with Myra. She stuck by her through all of this shit, having already washed her hands of Maureen. Why? Because she got pregnant and married somebody they didn't believe in when she was underage, which means really she needs support more, but whatever. Yeah. I'll never understand parents like that. I never will. Smith ended up in prison for stabbing a man and got a slap on the wrist for killing his father who had terminal cancer. It sounds like he wanted it. And so he served a couple days. So they were pretty clear. They were like, you're still not allowed to do that, but right. So that's why I said later, he maybe not, it was not so much against murder, but this is a very different kind. While he was in prison, Maureen lost the kids, unable to support them, and they were put in different homes. And when he got out, he took a 15-year-old bride and got custody of his children back. I was like, you gave him custody? Okay.
Him and his 15-year-old bride. Okay.
Yep. Because he and Maureen were both super young when they got married.
Right.
They both were. They were like, I don't know.
But he's not still 15.
He also wrote a book with a co-author called Witness about the situation, about all of it. So he made more money on it. Right. I felt bad for Maureen in all this. She didn't do anything. She didn't know her sister was doing anything. She was not the one who committed crimes. She was with this David Smith guy. Her mother disowned her. Her mother never helped her through all of this, or she wouldn't have had to lose her kids. She actually got attacked while 8 months pregnant in the apartment building by somebody who was pissed about him making money off of it. I mean, did she get that money too? Sure, but she did not control her husband. In that year, they better have known that she did not control her husband. So, like, her whole story this side story made me sad.
That is sad.
She did ultimately remarry, and so that's nice, I guess. I'm sure her mother wasn't there. And I was like, her mother was willing to support a rapist and murderer, but not her daughter who got pregnant at a young age. How?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't know.
I'm never going to get past that. I'm just not. Like, I keep going back to it, but how is that better? Keith Bennett's mom visited the Moor where her son's body was supposed to be until her death in 2012. Oh. She would go out there with a spade and she would dig herself. Oh. And she did that. She did that for all those years from the 60s to 2012.
God.
I have pictures of her on the Moor that I will be posting.
That's tough.
It's heartbreaking. And I decided not to go into there were things about each of the, I mean, there was divorce. There was, as happens with stuff like this. Often the marriages can't survive it. The house where the couple had killed 2 of their victims was torn down and is a patch of grass now in the neighborhood. They intentionally tore it down because 2 people were killed there and horrifically, and nobody wanted to live there. So, all right, we'll live in a patch of grass. My sources were the New York Times, BBC, and Wikipedia. And I will say this one, I had to lean heavily on Wikipedia. And I was like, really, New York Times and BBC? Like, you couldn't give better information?
You couldn't get it together?
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. This is where my mind space was at when I started this. So, I was in really bad headspace. So, and obviously, I don't know what everybody else needs to hear in their life. I was at the point of, if I hear one more story about someone I know being abused as a child, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think my heart is going to explode out of my body. It happened again. And it was in casual fucking conversation that they dropped this piece of news. It wasn't oh my God, I have to tell you. And they were like, yeah, it's okay. It happened. I've dealt with it. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I just need a minute to process. Because that's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
So anyway. Now, on that cheerful note, I'm going to talk about a woman who fought the odds, who fought her circumstances and fought her assailant and won. I needed a survivor story. So that's what you're getting this time. You're getting a serial killer, but you're getting a survival story. She's who I want to be when I grow up, assuming I ever do. We all know I'm not going to. If it hasn't happened by now, it isn't going to happen. So here we go, gentle listeners. Back to the 1980s again. No satanic panic this time, though. We're going to go south all the way to Tampa, Florida on November 3rd of 1984. I don't know why I felt I needed to know. I was in my first semester of grad school at this point in time. But 17-year-old Lisa McVey was riding her bike home from work at a donut shop. And that kind of shook me a little because I was like, shit, I rode my bike to campus and back home. Daylight, dark, didn't matter, had a light. Did I have a helmet?
I was out all day, every day.
Yeah.
You know?
I never thought twice about it. So, before I get into the details about what happened to Lisa McVey that night, I want to tell you what her life was like, what she was riding home toward. Her grandmother's house. So this is no little white-haired lady with cookies and hugs. Lisa's mother, who had addiction to alcohol and drugs, had forced Lisa at the age of 14 to move in with her grandmother to take care of her. She'd also been in and out of foster care and in some really fucking dodgy situations, like they lived in condemned buildings with no water, stuff like that. and her mother disappeared a couple of times. The night before, which would have been November 2nd, Lisa had written her suicide note. She just couldn't, the circumstances of her life were so bad that she didn't want to live it anymore. Her plan was to go to work and as soon as she got home, to shoot herself. In her own words, I was being sexually abused at home. My grandmother's boyfriend used to put a gun to my head every time he molested me for 3 years. It was nothing new to me. So she was going to take his gun and shoot herself. Speaking of people dying slowly and painfully, I'm hoping for exploding hemorrhoids, like I always do. She had a twin sister. He threatened that he would also assault her twin sister if she didn't go along with what he said. The other circumstance that drove Lisa to decide that she wanted to take her life was that she was 17 now, and her abuser was talking about her having a baby with him now that she was old enough.
Right.
Because, yeah.
Well, how better to control her?
Right? So what happened was, quick aside, when the police, obviously, I've already said she's the survivor. When the police wanted to hypnotize her to get more details, he was there. The grandmother's boyfriend was there posing as her father and refused to allow it, which made the police suspicious that something was wrong. Whatever way he was acting, they were like, this isn't right. They got her alone and were able to question her, and that's how they found out about the abuse at home. He was arrested and died in custody shortly thereafter. So yay, he's dead. Yeah. I just have to hope it was slow and painful. Or at least painful. Didn't have to be slow as long as it hurt a whole lot. So this gives you a really vivid picture of what her life was like.
Not great.
Not even close. So he had driven past her. She's on her bike. He drives past her. He turns around, drives back past her. So he's ahead of her now and parks in a church parking lot and waited for her to pass by. So when she did, he grabbed her by her hair and yanked her off the bike. Like, there's a reason why some of us cut our hair. She was blindfolded, held at gunpoint, raped, and tortured for 26 hours. Lisa said, and she's been very candid in her interviews, she's like, I was ready to die by my own hand. And when this guy yanked me, I was like, nuh-uh, fuck that. I want to live.
Yeah.
I got to beat this. So she engaged. She was so smart.
Because he had the audacity. It's the principle.
She engaged her attacker in conversation, asking him about his motives to the point where he admitted he'd recently had a bad breakup. When he said that, Lisa offered to be his secret girlfriend. She said, we don't have to tell people how we met. She worked to gain his sympathy by telling him she was the only caretaker for her ill father. She was, of course, scared this entire time that she was going to be killed. So when he let her go to the bathroom, she touched fucking everything. She touched the mirror. She touched the bottom of the toilet bowl. Places where if he cleaned up, he might not get. She left fingerprints everywhere.
Especially easy in a bachelor's.
Well, yeah.
Very smart.
So she was hoping that if she was killed, the police would use the fingerprints to identify her killer. She counted the steps on the way into his place in case she got the ability to run. She would know how far. She kept track of what direction we drove in, how fast he was going. You know, he sped up, he slowed down, he turned, which direction. She was blindfolded this entire time. By touch, she was later able to give police a description of the man's haircut, the pockmarks on his face, and his mustache. She was able to describe his vehicle and the route they took from the abduction site, all while being blindfolded and abused at gunpoint. One of the sources said that when he took her out of the house at the end of this time, she was able to adjust her blindfold minutely so she could see a word that was on the dashboard of the car. And why I didn't write down the word, I don't know, because now I can't remember it. But she was able to see little bits of things. She was able to see that they had stopped at an ATM. She was able to see that the car was maroon or red. So she couldn't see him, but she got a lot, and she memorized everything. She was eventually able to convince him to let her go by spinning this tale about her sick parent. He dropped her in a remote area and instructed her not to remove her blindfold for 5 minutes. So she did. She stood there and waited until the car was out of sight to take the blindfold off. Then she made her way home. She got there and told her grandmother and her grandmother's boyfriend what happened. Her grandmother's boyfriend accused her of cheating on him, questioned her, and beat her for 5 hours about just exactly where the hell she had been. Mm-hmm. When her story didn't change at all, didn't waver at all, he eventually called the police. And it took her more than one try. I think she had to go to the police 3 times. It took her more than one try to convince the police she was serious, because even her grandmother told them she was lying. Grandma, I hope you died a slow, painful death.
And Grandpa, everybody, just slow deaths.
Because of her incredible memory for all of these details, the information Lisa provided led the police pretty quickly to Bobby Joe Long. Do you recognize the... you know serial killers way better than I do. Yeah. So, wow. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't describe him to you.
Okay. Robert Joseph Bobby Joe Long was born in October of 1953 in West Virginia. He was born with an extra X chromosome and had a variant of Klinefelter syndrome. One of the symptoms is extra estrogen production, and he was teased as an adolescent for his large breasts. When he went through puberty, he got breasts, and he later had breast reduction surgery. Wikipedia also said that here's the quote, he had also suffered multiple head injuries as a child, resulting from diverse accidents.
Diverse accidents.
And I'm like, could we be vaguer? I did find one of them was, like, when he was 5, he fell off a swing, and then something happened to him when he was in the Army. Can't remember what. Because I was just having a conversation with somebody else about some things they witnessed when they were in the Army, and I don't want to conflate the two. But so he had a couple of head injuries. He also slept in his mother's bed till he was a teenager and had problems with the men that she brought home with her. He did marry his high school girlfriend, and they had 2 children, but they divorced after 6 years after he became physically abusive. Long is known as the classified ad rapist. So it's believed he raped 50 women. He would go through the classified ads in the Penny Saver. It told them, and other papers, but it was, man, they really hammered on the Penny Saver hard. And show up at someone's house as though to buy either whatever the item was, or, hey, your house is for sale. Can I take a look at it? If it was a woman home alone, he would ask to use her bathroom. If she let him, he had a rape kit. So he had a knife, he had rope to bind her. So he would tie the women up, rape them, and then rob them on his way out of the house.
Yeah.
What a peach.
This is why either we both need to be, in fact, typically it's Jeff will meet somebody somewhere if we're doing anything like that. He's like, we will meet at a Starbucks in front of everybody else and do the exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm like, and people do that. They're like, oh, just leave the money under my front doormat and just take the item.
Right.
I'm like, really? Really? So in 1981, Long was charged, tried, and convicted of rape. But after bombarding the judge with letters requesting a new trial, his request was finally granted and the charges were dropped. To backtrack on this one a little bit, some sources made it sound like he was tried for all 50 rapes and robberies, but another source, and it was only one source, so take it with a grain of salt, or a boulder of salt, they seem to have some more in-depth information. A woman he had been living with had filed rape charges against him, to be soon followed by assault charges after he hit her. That seems to be the case, which went to trial, then was retried and dropped. It wasn't the big 50 rape case. In July of 1983, Long was working as an X-ray technician at a hospital when he met a nurse named Emma. They fell in love, and Long swore he was a new man. He was turning over a new leaf. He called his family in West Virginia to tell them how he was going to be a new person. He started going to church with her. And guess what? He liked to gift her with expensive jewelry. Now, this was jewelry he stole from his rape victims. And after he quit his job and had no source of income, he kept giving her jewelry, and Emma never asked him how he could afford it. I mean, I know there's such a thing as putting your head in the sand, and we've talked about this with a psychologist friend, and I'm like, how the fuck does that happen? That you're married or living with someone who's a serial killer or serial rapist, and you have no clue. Around this same time, Long was accused of sending an obscene letter and photographs to a 12-year-old girl in Tampa. Officials had traced phone calls he had made to the 12-year-old, and he received a sentence of 2 days in jail and 6 months probation.
Of course.
12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
2 days in jail.
Uh-huh.
How did he make the transition from serial rapist to serial killer? On March 27th, 1984, Long made a transformation from which he would never return. This direct quote here. On that date, he picked up 20-year-old Artis Wick in Tampa. After raping her, Long found himself strangely unsatisfied. Rather than leave her as he had his other victims, he strangled Artis Wick to death. Long believed he had discovered the perfect method to guarantee that he would not get caught for his crimes. And actually, because I'm focusing on the survivor, I'm not going through all of his victims. There were 50 that he raped. Then there were another dozen he killed. Even though Artis was the first one he killed, her body wasn't found until a long time later. Right. While he was abducting, raping, and killing women, he was still committing the classified ad rapes. And he had through all of his relationships. When he was living with a nurse, when he was married.
Right, which I feel makes it very clear to those people who do not comprehend that rape has nothing to do with I need to have sex.
He had a lot of sexual issues because they noted, I think it was when he was in the Army and he was in the accident, he was in a full body cast in the hospital and he still managed to masturbate 5 times a day.
Wow.
That's determined.
Yeah.
So to me, that is out of his control.
Right.
I mean,
but there is an issue there.
Yes.
That's an unnatural sex drive there.
That is, yes. And that's what they called it. In total, he killed 10 women in 1984. 2 of those in the 12 days after he released Lisa McVey, but before he was picked up. He was arrested on November 16th and eventually pled guilty to multiple counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape. He got a life sentence for each count. In 1986, he was sentenced to death for 2 other murders, but he wasn't executed until May 23rd of 2019, 33 years after he was arrested. That appalls me. I know, you got to go through all the appeals. But he confessed. He admitted. He told them how to find the bodies. Okay. I'll calm down. No, I won't. By all accounts, once Long was taken into custody, he readily confessed to all of his crimes. He even drew a map for police to find a previously undiscovered body of one of his victims. There was plenty of evidence to support that the rapes and murders were premeditated, even if the choice of victim was left up to chance. So he bought the tape and the rope and stuck it in his glove compartment.
Yeah.
Just, he didn't know who it was going to be. But like I said, I want to go back to Lisa McVey. In 1995, she was working for the local Parks and Rec department in Florida. She had to call the police to report a break-in at their office, and the responding officer said to her, "You've got the attitude to be a cop. Ever thought of that?" In 1999, she transferred to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office as a dispatcher and became a reserve deputy. She went through the police academy and was formally deputized in 2004. She is now working for the same department that caught and arrested Long. She specializes in combating sex crimes as well as working to protect children. She also works as a middle school resource officer, teaching students how to handle potentially dangerous situations. And now I'm going to tear up. Okay, so the best thing I can tell you about Lisa McVey, Noland, apparently she did at some point get married. She attended Long's execution wearing a t-shirt that said, "Long, ... overdue." I'm like, bitch, yes.
Nice.
She really wanted to look him in the eye. She wanted him to see her before he died. He never opened his eyes.
Ugh.
Coward.
That's annoying.
To the end.
Yep.
To the bitter end. But he was eventually executed. I heard from a couple of different people who interviewed her. Apparently people in Britain really want to interview her. She is very open and she's very honest about what happened to her, but apparently she has very firm boundaries about what she will and will not talk about. And considering all the detail that she is given, I'm like, wow, I think she's probably, I don't know this, I think she probably protects her family because I only saw one reference to the fact that she had a twin sister. So if she takes the responsibility, this is her story, and she has turned her whole life around. So my sources for this were my handy dandy True Crime a Day calendar, Wikipedia, of course, allthat'sinteresting.com, francisfarmersrevenge.com. I don't even know what that's about. The UK Independent and the US Sun. But yeah, I thought we need somebody who
overcame and then went on to do good things.
Yes.
It's always awesome.
I always hate that they had to go through that, but...
Right. But they turned it into something that helps other people, so... But I don't want to go so far as to say there's a reason that it happened.
No.
Because that's gross.
Fuck that.
Right. That's just gross.
That's the worst thing I think.
It's great that the thing that happened that was shitty and shady, that they made something good of it, but it didn't happen for a reason.
No. I think that's the shittiest thing you can say. Everything happens for a reason. Bite me. Bite me. Bite me.
So, we're coming to the close of Native American Heritage Month, so don't forget to check out a writer, a TV show, a movie, some sort of media by a Native American person, and maybe learn about a random Native American person. That would be nice.
Reservation Dogs.
Reservation Dogs is a good show, and it's, if you like to binge watch, it has finished out. It has its seasons, and that's it. So, good thing to binge watch, because you know it'll come to a wrap.
Yep. And it's good.
It's excellent. The spirit guide is the best.
Oh my God.
He is the best ever, and that actor is now like one of my favorite people.
Mm-hmm.
He's amazing. So yeah, check out that. There's all kinds of...
and you know what? If you need a recommendation, reach out to us. I'm sure we can come up with one.
That's
or
right.
12.
Or a few. So... Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Check us out on buymeabook.com/mayhem to support the show, and we'll talk at you later.
We will talk to you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.